Good afternoon. Before I even welcome you, I want to invite you to take a few deep and calming breaths. I am quite sure that Anita and Thayer would not want their memorial service to be a stressful occasion for anyone. So I invite you to, again, take a few deep, calming breaths so that your heart and spirit might open to all the goodness and all the memories and all the love that are here for you to receive this afternoon. And I thank you for your patience. I am quite sure that it will be well rewarded. On behalf of the Greene family and First Church Amherst, it is my honor to welcome you to the celebration of the lives of Anita and Thayer Greene. We come together in this strange and somewhat surreal time, our faces masked, but our hearts broken open, to give thanks for Anita's groundbreaking life, for Thayer's deeply impactful life, and for the life-giving and love-sharing life they created together. We come here today to testify to how their lives have shaped and blessed ours. We come to recognize Anita and Thayer and the communities they participated in, nurtured, and supported. Communities of family, friendship, and faith, as well as church, healing, music, sports, witness, and service. And we come to proclaim the ways in which they are and always will be part of us. We will hear stories and tributes from family members and friends. We will see pictures that spark our own memories. We will hear and sing some of their favorite songs. We will reflect on their lives' meaning to us and to the world, to the gifts that they have given us and the ways their love has shaped us. We will cry and laugh and pray together. I'll be honest with you, I have never officiated at a memorial service for more than one person. And I have surely never led one service for two remarkable forces of nature. And it may be that you have never attended such a service. But as most of you know, we were just days away from celebrating Anita's life when Thayer slipped through the thin veil that separates this world from the next and joined her in life everlasting. And so here we are, faced with more loss and grief than any one family should have to bear in such a short time, and also with the challenge of giving both Anita and Thayer their individual due. We're going to do our best, fully realizing that both our grief and our gratitude will last a lifetime. We hope and pray that this afternoon we will also come to more fully accept the truth that the Anita and Thayer of flesh and blood are no longer with us, even as we become more aware of just how very deeply their spirits, love, and legacies will always be a part of us. Thank you for being here today. I know some of you have come from far and wide to bear witness not only to Anita and Thayer's lives, but also to honor their family and to recognize within you and among you their living legacies. I also want to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining us online, some from right here in Amherst, others from across the country, and maybe from even around the world. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank Dick Madison, our minister of music, our deacons and cantors for ministering to us all, and Henry Barber Just and Russ Vernon Jones for their technical assistance today. Whether you are here in the sanctuary of First Church Amherst, a congregation that Thayer and Anita loved so much, or are joining us via our YouTube channel, your presence here today is a powerful and moving testimony to the love and care Anita and Thayer showed you, to all that you learned from them, and to the many kinds of blessed ties that bind us all together in life and death and beyond. As Thayer and Anita blessed you and all of us, so you today honor them and bless one another and all of us by being here. Thank you for being part of Anita and Thayer's lives and the lives of Becca, Allison, Rachel, Donald, Brooks, Tripp, Nicole, Jamie, Samantha, Sarah, Rowan, and all their friends, and the friends and loved ones they considered family. Thank you for being part of the life that they all made together. We gather knowing that Thayer and Anita's lives will continue to bless ours long after this day, and we hope and pray the same for you. Now let us pray. God, who is love, we thank you for the long, full, and expansive life of your beloved daughter, Anita, for her devotion to family and friends and church, for her feminism and faith, for her insistence that body, mind, and spirit are one, and her belief in the sacredness of flesh. We thank you for her sharp mind, independent spirit, forward thinking, gracious hospitality, and her hearty laugh. We thank you, too, for the long, full, and impactful life of your beloved son, Thayer, for his open mind and his wide heart, for his deep faith and his lifelong commitment to the church and to healing, for his passion for the Red Sox and so much more, for his booming voice and engaging storytelling. We thank you for their 70 years of marriage and for the life Anita and Thayer made together, for their commitment to one another through many seasons of change, for their devoted daughters and beloved grandchildren, for their work together for the many causes and organizations they cared about. We thank you for this time to gather together with Anita and Thayer's family and friends to celebrate the gifts of their lives. May this service comfort and strengthen them all. For the spirit of life, which never dies, we give you thanks and praise. Rekindle that spirit within us this day, that we might all live in love for your glory. We pray in the name of the one who came that we might have life and have it abundantly. Amen. may be seated. Please join me in the recitation of that great poem of comfort and assurance we know as the 23rd Psalm, in whatever words are most comfortable for you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul. She leads me in the paths of righteousness for her name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thank you for your welcome, Vicki. My sisters and I would also like to welcome and thank all of you, and there's so many of you, it's just wonderful, including those who are tuning in virtually, and we do feel your energy, for being present today to celebrate the extraordinary lives of Anita and Thayer Greene. We are so appreciative of your emails and cards. Your love and support has brought immeasurable comfort as we go through this time of deep loss. Now that we are celebrating both Thayer and Anita, I would advise that you buckle up, as this will be an emotional ride and may take some time. There are so many stories to tell. To give you a sense of our family life, I will share several, retold many times, indelible moments in our Greene family history. I am Rachel, the baby of the family. My parents hadn't exactly planned for me. I was told growing up that I was the surprise. My wonderful Aunt Merlis, my mother's sister, also the youngest, was told growing up that she was the mistake. Thayer and Anita understood how the power of language, down to a single word, can bring light or wounding to one's life. My mother was a very strong woman. My dad certainly met his match on so many levels. With each of her 3 pregnancies, she was determined to deliver her babies with a minimum of drugs. She made it crystal clear to the doctor that if he dared to put her out and resort to using forceps, which was in vogue at the time, she would put an evil curse on him and his family for the rest of their lives. Needless to say, he paid attention. One morning when we were living in what used to be the parsonage, right over there, for First Church, my dad, rushing out the door for communion Sunday, stopped and gazed at my mom as she was nursing one of us. She quietly looked up and said to him, "You will take your sacrament and we will take ours." My dad loved that story. Anita was the social director in our family, connecting friends and extended family through parties, dinners, weddings, anniversaries, phone calls, and funerals. She welcomed and deeply cared for so many. She also was the caretaker of 2 homes with projects and jobs to attend to. Her to-do list would have 30 entries, and by the end of the day, they would all be crossed off. It's exhausting, but yes, it's the honest truth. I never thought that now reading a to-do list or a grocery list in one of her many notebooks would make me cry. My dad was a natural-born storyteller. The sharing of his war stories and his childhood and family stories from Dublin and Jaffrey, the ancestral homes, were captivating to hear. The family dinner table was where we all came together. After a day of work, Anita would cook the meals. They were always delicious, varied and gourmet, paired, of course, with a special wine from Thayer's cellar. My dad held court and quite honestly did most of the talking. But my parents were also exceptional listeners. Thayer grew up in a family that placed at least the edge of a silver spoon in his mouth. He would tell us that when he was growing up, he would get dressed in the morning and drop his pajamas on the floor. At night, when he went to bed, those pajamas would magically end up back on the closet door hook. When Anita and Thayer were first married, Thayer would get dressed in the morning and would drop his pajamas on the floor. At night, when he went to get ready for bed, they would still be on the floor. Anita happily informed him that Thayer, there is no more pajama fairy. She does not live in this house. Most of you know that Thayer was a rabid Red Sox fan. Anita considered herself a baseball widow. Sometimes he'd double dip and watch a Red Sox game on TV while also listening to a Patriots game on the radio. Thayer and Anita would go to many games at Fenway with Uncle Teddy, Dad's brother, and Aunt Jerry. They were very close and double dated quite often. For the double headers, Anita and Jerry came well provisioned. Checking someone's bag was not even a consideration then. They brought food in 2 thermoses, one filled with whiskey sours, Anita was a bourbon lover, and one filled with daiquiris. Back then, all the thermoses were lined with glass. Unfortunately, the whiskey sour thermos got dropped and the glass shattered, making the drinking of it seemingly impossible. My mother, though, never one to give up, had a determined and very brilliant solution. Being a cook, she naturally thought, strainers. She went to the ladies' room and commandeered a sink. The line, as is always the case for the ladies' room, was out the door. Anita quietly and very discreetly removed her bra. At this point, she had a full audience. She had luckily brought an extra container. She carefully put the cup of the bra into the opening of the container, and bit by bit salvaged most of the whiskey sours. She threw the bra and the damaged thermos into the garbage and joyfully headed back to her seat. Bra-less, which was in vogue at the time. One evening, the teenage me was loudly arguing with my mother on the stairs. We heard a door burst open, thundering footsteps, and the barking, deep, patriarchal command, "Rachel, I will not allow you to speak to your mother like that." I look up, my eyes flashing, as my mom slowly turns and says in a measured tone, "Thayer, Rachel is very angry with me, and I want to hear what she needs to say. This is our discussion, and you need to stay out of it." My father's hanging jaw snaps shut. He turns 180 and scampers back to the bedroom, his tail between his legs. He told me this story again about a week before he passed. He said that this story was a perfect example of the high level of training and skill Anita had as a therapist. And as a footnote, I might add that this is a perfect example of how well she was training him. As the Greene sisters hit high school, Anita was a designated driving instructor. Thayer did not possess the virtue of patience for this particular task. We learned how to drive on the back roads of Dublin and Harrisville, New Hampshire, in a standard light blue Peugeot station wagon. That was Mom's car. Dad's car was a dark green and black Mach 1 Mustang. He would drive everywhere, no matter the condition of the road or the rural or cityscape, as if he was on New York's West Side Highway, cruising at a median speed of 50 miles an hour. When he drove Anita's car, he was often called out for driving the Peugeot with a Mach 1 mind. Tripp and I had the honor of delivering the first grandchild, Nicole. Anita and Thayer waited a very long time to become grandparents, and they adored their 5 grandchildren. To Nicole and Jamie, they were Gamma and Gampa. When I was ready to give birth, Mom stayed with me and Tripp and toughed it out through days of on and off labor, late nights, and travel through a storm to the hospital. One night during this long odyssey, Mom made a delicious dinner for us and popped the video Junior in the VCR, starring a pregnant Arnold Schwarzenegger. She figured we may as well have a sense of humor about the whole situation, while Arnold and I Lamassed our way through the movie. I will miss calling my parents and hearing the joy in their voices. I will miss so much about them being in Dublin and all that family summers bring, especially sitting with them on the back porch, hors d'oeuvres and cocktails in hand, gazing up at Mount Monadnock. I will miss waking up to the smell of bacon and blueberry pancakes cooking on the stove. I will miss sharing the love of music with my mom, listening to her play the piano, and then playing a new piece for her that I had learned. I will miss sharing what Jamie and Nicole are doing and the latest exploits of Tripp on his tractor. I will miss just knowing they are there. I will miss watching Mom pick up a tantruming child, calm her, and take him to a separate room for time with Gamma. I will miss my father starting the family blessing at dinner and at our annual family meeting as we all hold hands. I will miss the soft moments of their later years and how they shared their love and gratitude. I will miss going home. The gift of having parents who live into their 90s is the bonus of time and the chance to get to know them as adults and to resolve old wounds and conflicts. I feel blessed to have been able to spend so many days with my parents in the last several years. As the radius of their physical world became smaller and smaller and the vitality of their physical bodies passed away, an astonishing thing has happened. Their spirits have now exploded to infinity. Each one of us carries a piece of them and we radiate it beyond to those we touch. Like exploding stars spreading out into the universe, we each embody a grain of their stardust.
Harder than I thought. I want to share the essence of my parents and what they gave me in life to help me become who I am. First, my parents' connection to God had the most influence over me. They married knowing that my dad was going into the ministry and that their life was devoted to God and to Jesus Christ. As a child living in the parsonage next to this church, I would run. I was definitely a runner, hard to keep up with. And I would sneak inside this very church. I remember this at 4 years old. And when I would sit in this church, this became my safe place. And I would feel I was not only in the house of God, I was also in the house of my Father. And I would hide in the pews and connect with myself. On Sundays, I remember sitting, On Sundays, I remember sitting in the back of the church with my family, probably because we were little and made a lot of noise. But I remember my dad's spirit filling the entire congregation. Even at a very young age, I was mesmerized with the feeling of the Holy Spirit that moved through him. At dinner, he would sometimes tell Bible stories, particularly for Lent and Advent. My mother would have us sing, and my father would tell us stories about Jesus Christ struggling with Satan. But again, I was spellbound. For someone to make Bible stories alive and present was truly a gift in my life. The conversation about God was organic and natural in my family, and it became a resource through my whole life. When I decided to get married to a man my father had never met because I moved to California, first he made us immediately come home so he could meet this man to make sure he was right for me and introduce him to the whole family. And my dad sat me down one night until about 2 a.m, grilling me with questions about this man that I had fallen in love with. He definitely had his doubts. When I shared with him that I thought God had brought us together, and that we were so aligned and compatible in our spiritual connection that it made any personality difficulties we had easier to work with. Because our commitment was to inner growth, change if need be, and stretching to be in our truth in God. When my dad heard this, he softened and opened and shared with me, that's the kind of relationship I have with Anita. And that's what brought us together. And at that point, my father fully sanctioned my marriage. Then my father grew to deeply love my husband, Brooks, and they became very good friends. They dove into deep spiritual talk with each other, and it was a joy for me to witness them together. My parents have given me a sense of adventure, that you're never too old to go back to school and change your career. My parents fought for human rights, man, woman, any race, any color. One lovingly example of this is when we took on a woman named Valerie Russell. She was one of our first babysitters. She was a student at UMass and involved in the First Church. And she was this beautiful black woman with a deep alto voice and big hugs, the kind of hugs you didn't want to leave. The first night she helped my mom with dinner, she set the table in the dining room. She then set a place for herself in the kitchen. My mother walked into the kitchen and saw the place setting and asked her, "What are you doing?" And Valerie told her she was happy and used to eating in the kitchen from previous jobs. My mother picked up her place setting and brought it into the dining room. She told Valerie that everyone in this house has a place at the table. From that point on, Valerie became a very important part of our family and a dear friend. My mother helped me to know that being a woman was just as powerful and good, and often even better than being a man. And I'm smiling because this is what she would do if she was saying this. She would have this impish little smile on her face. She was wonderfully stubborn and strong in her perspective. She mothered so many people back to themselves in her career, and her persistence helped her to achieve her goals, which also validated my need to be persistent in life. I have dyslexia, and by having my mother model that if you stay with something, you'll succeed, helped me to achieve what I needed to achieve with that disability. My mother loved acting and singing. I saw her in many plays, operas, and choirs. She also loved exploring coming into her body and helping others do the same. Studying Rubenfeld changed her life. Before that experience, she lived, as she would say, outside of her body and in a disassociated state because of childhood trauma. And after that, she took charge of her life and her physical presence in the world. Both my parents' love of travel, adventurous spirit in the inner and outer realms, dream realms, deeply imprinted me in my adventures around the world, exploring a career in spiritual psychology and working in the field of somatic trauma therapy. When I first stood up to officiate a wedding, I could feel it in my bones. Knowing how to speak about God to many people is in my DNA and goes back many generations of ministers in our family. When I shared this with my father, he said that in each generation, the father minister would pass on the mantle to one of his sons. He said in this generation, he was passing the mantle on to me and my creative ministry. Another wonderful essence of my parents was their connection to family. In all of their homes, the family events happened. Literally before Christmas, they would invite the whole neighborhood over to their house. They knew how to gather community and make you feel welcome. They actually adopted many of my friends as members of the family, such as my friend Shelley, who is our fourth sister and has been a part of our family since she was 12. It has made it very easy for me now to also have a sense of family central and to host many of the family events. Because of my parents' example, it's easy to provide a space for people to gather, and it feels like a gift of love. My parents had a strong connection to nature and animals. My mother's beautiful gardens have influenced me to nurture my plants, to have lots of flowers, and to honor to take in the beauty of nature. My dad's connection to Mount Monadnock as we would sit on the porch of our family home in New Hampshire and smell the pure mountain air has made this mountain a symbol of being in the physical world for me, and also grounding, and always reminds me of him. When he came home from World War II, he said he didn't feel at home until he sat on that porch and looked out on the mountain. And then he knew he was safe and he was home. A story about my dad that he liked to tell is that he didn't truly understand the evil of the Nazis until he saw the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp firsthand. This camp was discovered on April 4th, the Dachau camp. Dad's regiment discovered this camp in Nordhausen, Germany on April 11th. No one in the US military knew about these kind of camps until they found them. He was shocked by this experience. He said he was a scout in the front, and luckily there were no Germans left at the camp. They had evacuated. But he saw this man that he couldn't even truly recognize as a man because he was so thin, like a skeleton, wearing one of those striped uniforms. And the man came to him, dropped at his feet, and in German said, "Freedom at last, freedom at last." My dad wrote home after this experience to his mother saying, "Now I understand why I am fighting this war. What I saw today is pure evil." My sisters and I explored our connection to drama, music, and creative expression because of my mother's deep connection to all of these things. Singing at the piano, sing-along parties, and putting on performances for the family to watch supported me in my later life to speak in public. I think my introversion would have prevented that, but my family was a constant expression of coming out and being yourself. I think if I hadn't had that influence, I wouldn't be able to do the job I currently have. My parents really knew how to throw a party. Centennials, such as for our house in Dublin, anniversaries, weddings, christenings, memorials, and other events. Everyone in our family, extended family, was married by my father. All their children were christened by him. It was a very joyous experience, intimate and uniquely special to have my father and mother create these sacred times. My parents really loved us. And we really loved them. They believed in us and let us follow our heart's desire in life. And an example of my dad, a few days before he died on Christmas Day, one of the last things he said to me, very strongly, looking in my eyes, "I believe in you. The rest of your life will be a work of art and a life that demonstrates your loyalty to higher values." I'm very grateful to be the middle daughter, my name's Allison, of these amazing beings, my parents. Thank you.
Time for a big breath, everybody. Go for it, really, move your bodies. Rachel said buckle in, she was not kidding. So I'm Becca, I'm the oldest. I was the only child for 2 years. It was lovely. Oh, thanks. My daughter's reminding me I don't have to wear this thing. It was lovely. You can see the whole face now. Okay. So it is something to stand up here in this church I spent the first 8 years of my life in to celebrate my parents' lives. It's quite perfect, really. I remember dancing up that aisle when I was about 3 or 4, singing my own song while my dad was preaching. I think I upstaged him a little. I remember one day when it was Share Your Dad's Profession Day in my kindergarten, which was downstairs in this church. And my kindergarten teacher asked me what my dad did, and I responded, much to her amusement, "He writes sermons and mixes martinis." He loved telling that story. So many stories. My parents gave us a life that was full of feelings, loud and quiet. Travel, magic, music, art, theater, dance, philosophy, love, lots of laughter, deep thoughts, comedy, imagination, education, a sense of independence, loyalty, and respect for family, and the ups and downs of marriage were in full view to all of us. There were tough times, of course, but we were so fortunate to have them in our lives for so long. They were here for our marriages and became grandparents much later than most because they raised women who had things to do before they became mothers. which I, thank or blame my mother for, I'm not sure, but they both grew, changed, and transformed their inner and outer lives, creating models for us that showed change is a natural part of life, not to be afraid of it. They worked on themselves, their personal psyches and past traumas, and showed us how necessary it is to go into the darkness and face one's dragons. It's the only way one can become free. I'm going to make it. They taught us to follow our hearts and supported our choices of career and educational aspirations. They hosted 3 weddings, a few christenings, and many fabulous parties. Through it all, they put a great emphasis on their marriage, taking lots of vacations separate from us, and sometimes from each other. They loved animals, Labrador retrievers, and all kinds of cats. We grew up loving animals and also loved horses and learned to ride. Sports were part of our lives: tennis, sailing, swimming, golf, riding, skiing, skating, and running. I will always be grateful to my mother, and this has been said before by my sisters, but especially for her love of music, piano, theater, singing, and dancing. They took us to see Broadway musicals every Thanksgiving. I had all these performing arts classes starting at a young age, and eventually fulfilled one of her early dreams of being an actress. I will always be grateful for their support, coming to see me in as many of my shows as they could. My dad flew to Kalamazoo, Michigan to see me play Julie in Carousel, and Buffalo to see me in Cabaret, to watch me in these shows. They even took a cruise on a ship that I was performing on, which had its perks too, And I got to do my own solo cabaret and sing My Heart Belongs to Daddy while sitting on his lap in the audience. I'll never forget having the chance to play Lola in Damn Yankees in Keene Summer Theater, which is very near our ancestral home in Dublin, and where my whole family came to see it. But for my dad and his brother, my Uncle Ted, that show had the most meaning. Red Sox fans to the core. They love that baseball musical. And the special secret sauce for my dad was that the devil was a main character. He was fascinated by the devil and evil, and wrote his PhD thesis on Satan and Psyche. I feel so very happy that last November, Dad was able to see me perform in a wonderful production of the musical Cabaret in Northampton. It had great meaning for him because of his World War II experience, and my fellow actors really wanted to meet him and get his impression of the show. This is a memory I will cherish. Little did we know that we would lose Mom 3 days later. When I was trying to decide whether to go for a social work or a drama therapy degree, I felt like I should do the sensible thing and do the MSW, and my dad said, "Follow your bliss," and encouraged me to choose what my heart said to choose, not my brain. And he was right. I may not make a huge amount of money as a drama therapist, but I know that I love what I do, and I am never regretful of my choice. For both my parents, loving and being fulfilled by one's work was essential to a happy and long life, and I intend to live a really freaking long time. In my 20s, I took my mom out in New York City and bought her dinner and shared a bottle of wine. I used the opportunity to apologize to her for being a difficult teenager. I was wired up so differently from her, and we often did not connect very well. She was so surprised. She tried to tell me she could have been a better mother, she could have done this or that, and I told her to just listen and take in what I was saying. Mom did not have a good relationship with her mother, and I know She did the best she could without having had a loving model to learn from. That moment in the restaurant, we entered a new phase of our relationship, and we only got closer as the years went by. She told me several times she wished she was as expressive and extroverted as I was, as she might have had an easier time growing up. She told me never to be ashamed of how I am, and that she was working hard on herself to open up more of her extroverted side. That was a revelation to me, as I had always thought that I was way too much for my family. Mom planned and produced 3 weddings, numerous parties, huge celebration, making every holiday special for us kids, and was an amazing cook, all while working getting her master's, her Jungian credential, and trying to get her PhD finished. They both were 69 years old when they received their doctorates. One thing that people may not know about my mom is that she was insecure about her intellect and ability to present high-quality, peer-reviewed work. But she was published in several journals, was a popular workshop presenter, and an innovator in the field of Jungian psychotherapy. She brought conscious touch and awareness of the body into Jungian analytical profession. I did inherit a bit of that insecurity, but what I really inherited was both of my parents' ability to procrastinate. As my dad would say, procrastination is part of my creative process. My parents' willingness to keep learning and never think of themselves as too old was a great model to me, as evidenced by the fact that I'm presently working on my 2nd master's, and I'm not telling you how old I am. They both have encouraged my twins' academics and interests, their singing, acting, music, poetry, creative writing, pre-med studies, and cooking. Sarah even used Anita's PhD dissertation as source material for her independent study in high school. Their influence continues to be passed down to the next generation. Mom was with me when I gave birth to my beautiful twin girls, and my kids had the best grandparents they could ever ask for. Mom and Dad stuck around a long time for the grandkids to finally appear, since it took a while to make them, and that was fortunate and wonderful. I'm so glad we made the decision to move to Amherst 19 years ago when I was pregnant from New York City. Mom and Dad had close connections to both my girls. They so loved being grandparents. My dad used to say to the 3 of us daughters, "Marriage is optional, but grandchildren are not." So many memories. They lived long lives that were jam-packed and full of everything. Anita and Thayer would talk about their long lives of having lived several lifetimes or reincarnations during this one. They devoted their lives to helping others, to their family, children, their grandchildren, to each other, their friends and colleagues. This last year, dementia took away so much of my brilliant, beautiful mother. But she didn't acknowledge or recognize me for a very long time, but I loved her so deeply. I loved putting together their 70th wedding anniversary in the nursing home last June 30th. We had cake, we talked to her, and played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, their song, which she responded to with just wide-eyed wonder. And Dad held her hand and cried. That was one of the last times I really saw her in there, and I hold that close. As hard as it is to say goodbye to both of them in such a short time, I know they were ready to go. I know that they are so much happier now that they are together and free of their physical bodies, and they would have absolutely loved that we are celebrating them together. Tomorrow would have been my dad's 96th birthday, a spring baby, and the beginning of a new time on this earth. In the spirit of Thayer and Anita, this is participatory, get ready. In the spirit of Thayer and Anita, I ask that you all join me because of their experience and their connection to God and Christ, the divine, this building, this room, I ask that you stand. Probably need to at this point anyway. Stand and join me in a loud and spirited hallelujah, loud enough for them both to hear it. Let her rip. 1, 2, 3. Hallelujah! Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Allison? Okay.
All right. You have to excuse my voice. I'm coming over a cold. But I'm Nicole. I'm the oldest grandchild. And I think everyone that's met Anita and Thayer can say that they were two very special, special people. I call them Gamma and Gampa, and I pretty much thought that they were the two most magical people on the planet. When they were around, I could easily forget there would be anyone else in the room because I was always so awestruck by them. I wanted to listen to everything they were talking about, help them with whatever they were doing, and just be in their presence for as long as I possibly could. Everything about them was fascinating to me, and they always let people know how special and loved they were. I'm so happy I got to know them for my entire lifetime, from when I was young and we were swimming in Dublin Lake, to the past couple years visiting them as they grew old. My relationship with them was always so special and unique. There are so many amazing memories I have with them that I could be up here for hours, so I want to go through just a couple of my favorites. Gamma would tell me an Anna, Ella, and Bella story every night when I was a kid in Dublin. These stories were magical scenarios where Anna, Ella, and Bella would go into the forest behind their house to talk with their animal friends. Gamma created a new version of the story almost every night we were together when I was younger, and this went on for years. I always begged her for another one each night because they were so creative and made me feel so safe before going to sleep. Most days before dinner in Dublin, Gamma and I would go to her garden, which she loved, to pick fresh flowers together so that we could arrange beautiful bouquets for the dinner table for everyone to enjoy, and that became our little thing. She always made everything so pretty. Gampa's love for the Red Sox and watching these games in his man cave in Dublin. For him, this was a serious matter, but mostly it was just a bunch of our family packed into that room, and he wouldn't be talking because he was so focused. Gamma and Gampa traveled the world together, and it felt like they visited every place imaginable. On each trip they would take, Gamma would find a doll from the town that they were staying in and bring it back for me. Not only did she just bring the doll back, but she would write out a whole story about the doll's life in that town, what its name was, its culture, what it did for a living, so that I could get a sense of each place they went to. Now I have a collection of dolls around the world that outline Gamma and Gampa's travels, which they so dearly loved doing together. The man cave in Dublin was also the spot where I would find myself getting a 2-on-1 therapy session with Gamma and Gampa. I would walk in because I always wanted to be around them, and I would seek out wherever they were. And soon enough, they would close the door and start asking me deep questions about my life and feelings, and I was like, oh God. But I got through it, and I always did love talking about everything with them. And them sitting down and asking questions about my life showed me they were always listening and there for me. Listening to Gampa recount his amazing stories of meeting Gamma in his early 20s, being in World War II, his work as a minister, then as a therapist, and just life in general, him playing tennis in Dublin and just always being active, it was just such a great sight to see. And one thing I'll always cherish is how close Gampa and I became over the past couple of years. It was always such a treat to visit him and talk about life, and being with him one-on-one made us even closer, and I'll always love this time with him. Most of all, my best memories of them will be their hugs. I could wrap myself in their arms for what felt like years and still not get enough of it. And then the last thing I'll share, and on a funny note, is Gamma's first text to probably anyone, which I was the lucky person to receive it. I somehow talked Gamma into trying to learn how to text, not thinking she would actually do it. But that was dumb of me, because Gamma was always up to try something and not afraid of a challenge, so I'll read the text. She goes, hi, space, 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 Nikki, space, 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 return, space. My first text, I go, is this Gamma, question mark, question mark? She goes, yes, it is Gamma. I go, hi, how are you? She goes, well, I got a text 10 hours later, which is probably how long it took for her to figure out how to type this message on her flip phone. She goes, I'm just learning, and my letters, capital S, are too close together. I, space, 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 am fine, and I am looking, period, forward to Thanksgiving, space, space, space. I'm so frustrated with this phone. I'm signing off for now. Call you soon. Love, Gamma. After Gamma died, I looked at that text and I noticed the date, which was November 23rd, 2015. And exactly 6 years later, to the day of November 23rd, I was sitting next to Gamma, holding her hand, telling her how much I loved her. This time, she was taking on a new challenge. She was getting ready to say goodbye to us. And like the text said, she was signing off for now, but she would see us later. And so, I'll miss Gamma and Gampa a lot, and I'll miss their hugs, but I'm so thankful for my time with them, and I'm so happy about it.
My grandparents were many things, and I could go on for hours describing them to you. But really, when I think about my grandparents, I think of four things. They were loving, caring, and thoughtful. And the fourth, they were the best grandparents I could ask for.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm Nikki's brother, and I'm the second oldest grandchild. I'm not going to talk for a while because I'm probably the worst public speaker, but I just want to say that at this moment I feel truly grateful because as I stand up here, there's no lack of memories that I have of both Gamma and Gampa on my mind. For the last 19 years, I was able to spend more time than I ever could ask for with them. When school finally ended and it was time for summer break, it didn't only mean that school was over and I didn't have to get up early, it also meant that it was time to go to Dublin. Dublin was a special place for me. I grew up there most summers. I spent a lot of time with both Gamma and Gampa. One of my favorites, but also one of the scariest memories is the drives with Gampa from the house to the golf course, for sure. There were a lot of times where I didn't think we would make it, but he somehow pulled through every single time. Once we got to the golf course, it honestly wasn't much better. Me and him would sit in the golf cart while my dad would walk the entire 9 holes and go get the balls that me and Gampa both mishit into the woods. But it was always great. We would talk about life, the past, the future, the Red Sox, who I knew nothing about, but I tried my best to make it up that I did. In addition to the golf, the one-on-one sessions with Gampa in the man cave were some of the best times that I've had. Like I said, I don't know anything about baseball or the Red Sox, but if Gampa was in that room, I could sit there for hours. It also turned into a lot of conversations with him, 1v1, about life, academics, which he got on me about, which I needed, especially when I was younger, and athletics. Sometimes he didn't fully know what was going on with my life, but I always knew that he cared deeply about it. And while those talks might have stopped for now, which is fine, totally fine, I know that at some point down the road, I'll meet up with him again, and hopefully I'll have a lot of good things to say to him. With Gamma, it was the same type of love. Although one time, when I was about 5, I came for my week alone with my grandparents, and Gamma had just gotten some fake teeth. And I remember I got to the house, and I pleaded with my mom to take me home, because I was trying to explain to her that that was not my grandmother. Someone had taken my grandmother and brought her in. But that night, she read me an Image story, which was my version of the Anna, Ella, and Bella stories. And I knew that no matter if her physical appearance changed, I would always be my grandmother. I'm gonna miss her cooking, for sure. She was the one person that could get me to eat salmon or vegetables. My mother has tried countless times, but if it was not Gamma making them, I wouldn't have them. And just one last thing I want to say before I'm done. Something that they really made me think about was I wasn't sure what happened after death. Like, that's such a vague topic. And when I was growing up, I thought I was just done, like you were done. But now I'm starting to rethink that, because I know that Gamma and Gampa, like with their souls so full of life, so full of love, there's no way that that just goes away. So I'll meet up with them later on, hopefully have a good time, have some salmon. Thank you.
with me because I'm very dyslexic and just have like little scribbled things on my paper. I'm also rethinking death a lot with their passing. I had a very similar opinion, and as Jamie did. I'm Sarah too, the third middle grandchild, I guess, third by 30 seconds. Yeah, good 30 seconds. But anyway, I've never really related to them in the sense of God or religion. I personally had very different beliefs than them in terms of how one's morals are shaped around any sort of higher power. But I think that with their passing, I've learned that that doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, I knew their souls, and I don't really know where they are, but I know that wherever we like to think that they are somewhere, and some people would say that that's heaven. I don't know where they are, but I just know that they're also here. That's all that really matters to me. I think so much of me was shaped around my grandparents because I lived like 5 minutes away from their house ever since I was little. And with Sammy and I, my sister, they made a very strong effort to get to know who we were separate of each other, which was really hard with a lot of family members because, you pop out two at once and they're there in the same matching dresses at every Christmas event. It's like a different color at Easter. She'd do the pink, I'd do the yellow or green. But they really were able to see through that ever since I was really, really little. I think one of the first memories that I have of the two of them, or actually, I think it's probably not the first. It's just like definitely sticks out the most was the first time I heard somebody say the word dick. It was my grandmother, and she was explaining to Nikki how Florida was the dick of America. And I was like, maybe like 8. I was like, whoa. But so that was fun. And that's also something I never really thought I would be able to bond with my grandparents over, is like humor. But even in the room that I was in while Anita was passing away, I think we were talking about food and how we were needing to get a snack, and Grandpa is holding my grandma's hand and turns around and he goes, "I have no idea what you're saying. I just hope you're not talking about me." And we're like, "We're not, Grandpa, but how can he make jokes like that, He's incredible. He's one of the most fluid people. He can be everything at once because he knows himself and he's connected to every part of himself, so why not be everything at once when you can?" One of the hardest things for me was with the dementia, because I am a very thought-oriented person, and I related to my grandparents on an intellectual level that was very unique to our relationship. I remember when I wrote about my grandmother's PhD dissertation after finding it in Allison's garage, reading every single page in a day. As somebody who can't read that well, I cited it, and I tried to communicate that to her because I went over and made her breakfast one morning, but it wasn't processing until I showed her on my phone my work cited. I scrolled down, and she lit up, and she didn't have anything to say because she wasn't really talking much then, but it was huge to know that she knew that I loved her mind, and that is something that's so rare, is a mind that can continuously learn and continuously think, and that's what my grandpa and grandma had. My grandpa too, I remember telling him, and he almost cried because he hadn't been exposed to her intellectual capacity in a really long time. And they both had an incredible intellectual capacity. It's modeled how I operate. I remember I didn't get into many of the colleges I thought that I did, and I was ashamed to tell them, but they didn't care at all. And they are so proud of what I want to do. They just say, fucking go for it. You know, I don't think anybody's ever believed in my intellect the way that they did. And that was really, really powerful because I was a kid that my nickname was Dodo Bird when I was a kid, so it's not very bright. But they saw through that, and I don't think anybody else has really done it like the way that they have, because they would always ask me about how everything was going, and it was just beautiful, and I hope I can hold on to their knowledge, and I hope I can use it in my life, because they were so freaking smart. Oh, God. Thank you.
Hey, I'm her twin. You'll have to excuse me, I wrote this on my phone. Okay. Sarah and I call them Nana and Pa. Nana, I remember your 80th birthday. I thought you were so cool. You had so many friends. I thought I was so cool for being your granddaughter. And at the League Club, whenever I told anyone that I was your granddaughter, they'd treat me like a celebrity. I remember picking flowers in the Dublin garden with you before every family dinner, and you'd show off the centerpiece, giving Sarah and I all the credit, even though you did all the work. We weren't even old enough to be trusted with scissors. I think of you when I see black-eyed Susans, and I promise to grow more of them in the garden for you someday. Pa, you had a separate compartment for dessert, like the one I have for you in my heart. I see both of you when I look up at Monadnock. You stand tall on the top like you stood at church on the stage with your crowns, teaching me that you're never too old to play, never too old for dessert, and never too old to have grandchildren, even if it means they have to let you go before they even really start their life. I'm sorry you won't get to see me fall in love the way you two did. I'm sorry my children will only get to hear stories about how wonderful you both were, but they'll never get to hold your hand, or be given a pat down, or eat chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday morning in Dublin, even if they don't like chocolate chip pancakes. But since Grandma got up early to make you one, you pick the chocolate chips out and give some of the pancake to the dog. Grandma, you always used to sneak an extra treat to the dog when we'd come over to your house. I miss that yellow house. I miss singing the Advent candle song every week leading up to Christmas before I was allowed to eat the dinner you made us, even though we'd had that dinner a million times. It was always a Whole Foods rotisserie chicken and green beans with butter. I miss eating hors d'oeuvres in the living room. You'd always get those mushroom turnovers for me until Trader Joe's stopped making them. And I had to learn to like those hot dog things. I miss you. I didn't visit you much in the last few weeks. I didn't want to remember you with dementia. I didn't stay to watch you pass either, Grandpa. I left Allison's house half an hour early. Part of me still believed you'd pull through. You were so excited that my winter break was until the 28th of January, so you'd get to see me more. I told myself I'd write more poetry for you to read before going back to school after winter break. You loved my poetry, and I never, because you loved my poetry, I never wrote another one for you though, even when you asked me to every holiday. I thought maybe the longer I procrastinated it, the longer you'd stick around. I promise I'll write one for you someday. Like how I'll plant more flowers in the garden for Grandma. I love you both. May you rest in peace together.
through thousands, it seems like, of photographs. My mother documented all the events, but did not love putting albums together. So many of these pictures my sisters have never seen. It'll be for the first time for them and my family. And I'm not going to go through the whole slideshow. The rest of it will be shown at the reception, an ongoing loop of it, just for time's sake. I originally chose 300 photos and took away 200. I mean, took away 100 and left 200. So.
gift, the family that Anita and Thayer had and raised. What a gift you are. How blessed you are. May you all go forth and share as abundantly as they gave to you. You are so rare. My name is Penelope Tarasuk, and I'm a colleague of Thayer and Anita. I had the privilege of meeting them about 40 years ago at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico at the first Jungian conference there. I met Anita first, and she was presenting her pioneering work with the body at this Jungian conference, and she was with Sylvia Pereira and Marion Woodman, two very famous women. And the warmth and excitement and joy that they exuded was a kind of sisterhood. And she was very proud of her work. And I now understand better why Anita didn't have time to write. She wanted to write more, but she was holding children and making meals. And I understand that. The warmth and excitement and joy that these women exuded was such a pleasure for me. I was a candidate at the time and was very humbled to be in the presence of so many analysts. And we were all under the spell of the New Mexico enchantment. We were in a beautiful setting that was near the red cliffs and the rocks not far from Georgia O'Keeffe's home. Our family moved to New Mexico shortly after that for 11 years. Later, when I returned in 2005 to live in Massachusetts and continue working as a Jungian analyst, I preferred to live in the country and chose to live in South Deerfield, which would put me near to Thayer and Anita in Amherst. We all belonged to the New England Society of Jungian Analysts, and we were all involved in teaching and at the Boston Jung Institute, which is now the New England Institute. And I also immediately joined the Western Massachusetts Jung Association with Thayer and Anita. We served on boards of training and directors. We taught, we presented programs, we supervised candidates, analyzed patients and candidates, gave examinations, led people through their training, studied their written work and dissertations, went through exams with them, and built curriculum over many, many years. We had a spirited, dedicated collegiality, and we served here and in Boston. And I have to say, they loved their work. They really, really loved being Jungian psychoanalysts. They loved learning, and they loved the psyche, and they loved dreams, and they loved the privilege of sitting with people in their most vulnerable places and in their pain particularly. And throughout all of this, we've been heartfelt friends. Anita and I talked story and shared each other's sadnesses and our triumphs. We shared making meals for each other, and I was at their table many times. And Anita and I would meet at the Ginger Garden fairly regularly for many years. And I remember the day she forgot to come, and I knew that was the beginning. She had already begun to talk privately about her concerns about her memory. So I really walked with her toward what became very difficult. Anita's generosity was so abundant, and you've shown it in the pictures and everything that the children and grandchildren have said. Abundance at her table, in spirit, in heart, in her family, in her marriage, And Thayer and Anita would talk about their, I don't know, was it 3 or 4 marriages that they had within their marriage? They were very open with us about the struggles they had and the triumphs they had and their hard-fought deep love and commitment to each other over, 70 years, something like that? Something extraordinary and rare in this world. She taught about life, she taught about the body, she taught about sexuality and love and soul. She was humorous and she was also serious. And what stands out really is her generosity and her Mother Earthness that she shared in her work and in her family so beautifully. Anita was a master teacher and a delighted crone. I remember she came to my 60th birthday and gave me a book called Crones Don't Whine. She really loved coming into her aging, and she was a very wise elder. She was beautiful. She was a beautiful woman physically and exuded a dynamism. She was fiery and earthy, and she had a very soft heart. I have missed her in my life these last several years, and I'm saddened that she is gone. She and Thayer sat with me during one of the most difficult times in my life and witnessed, and I am forever grateful. Because Thayer's wisdom in that moment was what I saw and no one else saw, and so I felt less alone. It must be almost 3 years now. I had a dream of Anita, and I was able to share this with her, but I thought I'd share it with you also. Anita, I was standing, this is my dream, I was standing at the altar of a church, and here we are in her church. And there, spread out on the altar before me, was a radiant, delicately woven cloth. It was the weaving of all the threads of your life. Golden, silver, in beautiful order. It was luminous and radiating the meaning of your entire life, which is what I feel this is. The beauty was pure. I thank the family for taking such good care of Anita, especially in those difficult years that we all went through, very difficult years. And I thank her grandchildren, and I really, really appreciate your memories. Very fortunate. And Thayer. I also met Thayer at Ghost Ranch in Abiquiu, New Mexico. And he was a tall, extroverted, handsome, looming, dynamic presence. I found him totally overwhelming and unapproachable. He was very full of himself. But I did note that he was so rare among Jungians who are more like me, more introverted. He was extroverted and really, really reveled in it. He also really understood group work and the power of groups. And I had studied and run groups and been in groups, and I too appreciated the power of groups. I was too shy to speak to him at that time. And fast forward to September 2005, I was back from New Mexico at the annual meeting of the New England Society of Jungian Analysts in Boston. It was my first meeting of colleagues since being away for 11 years. And I was sitting in the back. Who was this tall, lanky man at the edge of the gathering with one earbud on, listening to the Red Sox, because I could hear the cheering, and the other earbud hanging down, and of course it was Thayer. He always had one ear somewhere else. He remained an active, avid Red Sox fan until the last weeks of his life, and I knew he was leaving this earth when he was no longer paying attention to the Red Sox. From 2005, Thayer was a highly active Jungian analyst, supervisor, faculty member, board member, donor, and community member in all matters Jungian here and in Boston. He was deeply invested in the mental health of hundreds of people, as was Anita. And when Thayer and Anita died, analysts and candidates called me because they knew I was close and shared the grief, but they shared stories of his teaching them and his paying deep attention to the development of their souls. While they were in Zurich studying for a while, Thayer studied with Marie-Louise von Franz, Carl Jung's very close colleague. Von Franz wrote in her acknowledgments of her first book, "I want to thank Thayer Greene for helping to finance the publication of Interpretation of Fairy Tales, 1970. This was one of her first works published, and it's still in use, and we used it just a few months ago in an exam, a fairy tale exam at the Institute. I told the story to the candidate who was preparing, and she told me the story of she went to a coffee just to find out about the Jungian training, and Thayer and Anita were there. It was a social hour. And afterwards, they came over and pulled her aside, and they said, "What's holding you up? Why aren't you kind of enthusiastically going forward?" And she said, "I'm a working mother. I don't have time and can't do it during the week." So they negotiated and helped get the training moved to weekends, and she could become an analyst. And it was her exam that I was working on recently, and she knew that Thayer had recently died. And so we invoked them when we were helping her get ready for the exam. And before her orals, and they're several days long, the exams, and before the orals, she told us the dream she had, which was she was going to visit a nursing home, or she thought she was going to a nursing home. But as she got closer, she realized it was much more of a big house, kind of like this, I might add, with wood. And she said, "I entered, and there were these stairways going up, and I realized they were all upstairs." And she said, "And I heard the piano music, and she said, I knew I belonged here." So she went into her final part of her exam fully knowing she was committed for the long haul of becoming an analyst. And Thayer and Anita were a part of that, and that's just one story. They had the unique vision and capacity to spot gifted teachers, writers, and analysts and support them in various ways. Thayer did not suffer fools. His annoyance was nearly famous. Anita, as you have all noted, was patient and always kind. I am deeply touched by the work we did together on the last stage of life. From their 70s through their 90s, we deeply reflected together on the meaning of life and the value of work, particularly their analytic work. And in 2011, I formed an elder panel of 6 elder analysts, including Thayer and Anita. And we were going to have them each speak about the meaning of their lives and the meaning of their work, the essence, the gem of it all. And I arranged to have this gathering at the Loomis community in South Hadley. I wanted all the candidates who were going to come out to experience a retirement center, a nursing home atmosphere, something different that many had never stepped into I wanted them to think about aging. And during the meetings leading up to that day, the meetings of the 6 elders, Thayer told me this was the first time that he really had been a part of a small group of peers addressing this meaningful preparation for this last stage and confronting dying consciously. He allowed himself to be a member, not in control, not organizing, just being one of the 6 people facing these things. He let himself put his ego aside, and he loved the experience and thanked me. This was also the time he had his last analysis, and I was personally thrilled to learn who his last analyst was, and it was Snuggles the cat, he proudly announced, and Snuggles appeared in several of those pictures. Thayer had softened and slowed down, and he was beginning to allow a state of being and listen to the creature. He was listening to the more gentle feline presence of nature and his own quiet feminine. This new sweetness emerged, and he took himself less seriously. It became clear to him what mattered was love. And a few years ago, and often with the help of Ed Tick, Dr. Ed Tick, a younger archetypal psychologist who moved to our area, who knows the work with veterans, PTSD, and the moral wound of war, Ed and Thayer really talked deeply, and there was a beginning of honoring his service in the U.S. Army Infantry in World War II, to honor his war trauma and his experience at 19 of assisting the liberation of a concentration camp, which was mentioned. His war traumas related can't read my writing. Anyway, but it took almost 70 years before he was really able to take those things seriously. It takes a lifetime to work on being in a war. And Thayer knew that my father, a Russian-Ukrainian, was a World War II veteran as well. He was a deep-sea diver who dove right after the Pearl Harbor bombings to bring up the bodies. And it nearly killed him. So Thayer and I could talk about war trauma, me as the daughter of a real war hero, and he as someone who had been there at the concentration camp and nearly killed on the battlefield. And he had said that God had spoken to him on a ship going over and told him he would be okay. When Thayer came back here, he became the chaplain at Amherst College and went on to become a Jungian analyst. He dealt with the question of evil. It deeply troubled him, fascinated him, and he wrote his thesis, his dissertation on this. I knew I wanted a friendship with him, with a human who could name this and address the immoral horror of war and sadistic cruelty, the dark side of the divine. I am glad he and Anita were not here on earth recently to bear this current situation in Ukraine. Over these last years, Thayer and I spoke about death, divinity, God, aging, the failing of his beloved body, and dying. Sometimes this was a very serious conversation, and sometimes it was quite humorous. Sometimes he would say, I'm neither here nor there. Thayer was born into great privilege compared to many people. He was a tall, handsome male who served his country, society, and he served his life in service to the soul. He was consistently generous with his resources and stayed open to learning and I got him David Blight's beautiful biography of Frederick Douglass, and he and I read that together during the pandemic. And our last conversations were about the hard work of creating and keeping democracy alive. He was at peace with his life, he loved his family and wife, and he was really ready to meet his Lord God. He was not afraid, and he welcomed the great divine mystery. I miss my dear friends there in Anita with all my heart, and I feel they're with me. And they are elders in our community, and we stand on this land of the Native Americans who came before us. And we are all needing the guidance of our ancestral elders. So Bear and Anita, help us. Thank you.
My name is Sam Gladstone. Many years ago, in one of the many rides that I took with Thayer back and forth to Boston to watch the Red Sox, he asked me if I would do what I'm about to do, which would be to speak after he died. He was, 24 years older than I was, even though he was my friend. And he was more than that. He was the father that I didn't have, the one that loved me, loved my soul, loved me completely unconditionally. And I was really blessed to have him in my life. And I have Anita to thank for it. When they moved up from New York, from Westchester, Anita wanted to have a holistic doctor. And so she called up a doctor on the other side of the river, a wonderful doctor, Harvey Letterman, and he said, "You don't have to come over the river, go see Sam Gladstone." And they walked in, and Thayer, as I was, unconventional, he was willing to have friendships with clients and patients, and I was. And I think it began by playing golf together. He got me back into playing golf. I played golf yesterday, and I've had the privilege of playing golf with Tripp and Jamie and Donald. And that was one of the many ways he demonstrated his generosity. And he and Anita were so giving to so many causes. It felt at times to me almost a detriment to them, their own financial beings. And he tried to get me to be a better golf player. He would buy me clubs, he would buy me lessons, and we just had a great time together. And these trips going in and out of Boston, and he would say this, I would agree, but he would say that the best part of it wasn't the game, but was the conversations that we had, the hours that we would spend in the car. And you've heard a lot of the stories. I just wanted to say some more about some of of what's been said. When he went into Nordhausen, which was actually, it was the Dora Mittelbau slave labor camp. They were making, the prisoner of wars, they were making the V-2 missiles. That's what they were doing. Thank God he was only there for 2-3 hours, because it impacted his life tremendously, as you've heard. And he felt imperative to make his life count after that. He had always said God was not ready for him to die in the war because he had work to do. And he spent his life healing damaged beings. He was an instrument of life. And he suffered from this experience that he had. And in 1977, he went to Esalen in California, and he relived the shelling that he had survived in the war, screaming and crying, and he felt like someone had lifted a secret weight off of his heart. And as Penelope said, it wasn't over there, you know. This healing went on and on and on as all of us who have had trauma, which is basically all of us, know about our own internal work and how hard it is to make change. One of the things we connected on so many things. I am blessed, my wife is here with me as well, to have a very strong, powerful wife, as Anita was. And he made the conscious decision to marry someone who wouldn't just sort of take him lying down, would stand up to him and be a force that he knew that was what was good for him. I'm not going to talk very long. It's a long afternoon already. I got to see him hours before he died. And it was an experience I'll never forget. It felt to me like I was one of Jacob's sons, because he blessed me. I can't tell you what he said, but it was a very, very powerful experience. And next to the Bible on his shelf, he would have an I Ching. He and Anita would throw the I Ching at times of decision. And I'm going to leave with two blessings. One from my tradition and one from the Buddhist tradition. May the Eternal bless you and protect you. May the Eternal's face give life to you and show you favor. May the Eternal's face be lifted toward you and bestow you peace. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. And may all beings be free. I will love Thayer the rest of my life and miss him every day.
Hello, my name is Shelley, and I'm honored to have been called the fourth daughter. The scripture reading is taken from 1 John, the 4th chapter. And the Reverend suggested this reading because it echoes what Thayer had said several times on Christmas Day, just this past Christmas. Beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Beloved, since God loves us so much, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God lives in us, and God's love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in God and God in us, because God has given us of God's Spirit. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them.
Now the green blade rises from the buried grain, weight that in dark earth for many days has lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again, like wheat that rises green. In the grave they laid their love whom hate had slain, thinking that their love would never wake again. Laid in the earth like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again, like wheat that rises green. Christ came forth at Easter like the risen grain. Jesus, who for 3 days in the grave had lain, came from the dead, the risen one is seen. Love is come again, like wheat that rises green. When our hearts are wintry, grieving or in pain, Christ's one touch can call us back to life again. Fields of our hearts, the dead and bare have been. Love is come again, like wheat that rises green. I was going to invite you to stretch before you sat back down. We've been sitting for a long time. Thank you for being here. I can tell you that at one time we had at least 75 folks with us online. So this has been a very rich time. Thank you, every single one of you who has shared. I have been blessed, and I know everyone has. I can tell you that as the person most responsible for how this service goes and how long it goes, I have been taking this all in and enjoying it all and thinking, it is so late, I should just do away with my remarks. And what I can tell you is that I heard in the back of my voice the voice of Thayer saying, absolutely not. It is your job to wrap all this together and make some meaning of it and preach the gospel while you're at it. So absolutely not. And I replied to Thayer that I think we've been making meaning all along, but okay. And this won't take too long. I would love to be wrong about this, but it seems to me they don't make men like Thayer anymore. Born to faith and a family steeped in tradition, he arrived in this world with a list of others' expectations even longer than the catalog of titles, accomplishments, and descendants his forebears had produced since stepping off the Mayflower. A highly educated son of privilege, he would enlist in the army, dodge enemy fire in Germany, and as you have heard, at age 19, help to liberate a concentration camp. A larger-than-life figure who followed his callings to church, community, goodness, and psychological and spiritual healing, he would also devote considerable energy to processing his own wartime experiences and humanity's capacity for evil. They do, thank God, still make women like Anita. You've already heard from 3, actually I would say 6 of them, in part because Anita was so far ahead of her time, in part because Anita cast the mold and helped pave the way for spirited, independent, smart, and yes, beautiful women who make the world a better place. Anita was a strong enough force that some might have expected her to chafe under the expectations of a pastor's wife. Instead, she met them and exceeded them because she insisted on being Thayer's partner. And so it was that while caring for 3 young daughters and regularly stoking not 1, but 2 coal-burning furnaces in the huge parsonage next door, she heard and followed her own calling to be a healer. And as for the life they made together, the family they created, the shared passions they pursued, and the many phases of their marriage that they worked, grew, and loved through together, well, that too is all too rare. That they both continued to see patients, engage with the world and this church, and entertain guests into their late 80s and early 90s is a marvel. More important than that, they continued to grow, learn, deepen, and soften, both individually and together, their entire lives, right up until the end. Thayer and Anita were constantly raising the bar, not because they had anything to prove or had some ego need to remain relevant, but because they loved life and they loved their family, they loved God, and they loved all the people in their lives. Now, I need to be careful here. As some of you know, we clergy types are charged with loving everyone in our care, and we are expected to love them all equally. No favorites and no favoritism. And yet some of you also know, particularly you members of First Church, that I had a particularly close relationship with Thayer and Anita and their family. And so I want to speak directly to that, because I believe with all my heart that the primary reason for that closeness had nothing to do with any favoritism on my part, and everything to do with the kind of people Anita and Thayer were and the kind of life they made together. And because I believe my experience with them and of them was not at all unique. One of the words that comes to mind is openness, or if you prefer, expansiveness, and the essence of spiritual being that fueled that openness, which is love. Thayer and Anita lived life with their hearts and minds pretty much wide open, forever seeking to expand their knowledge and understanding and to deepen their capacities for love and healing. They were constantly seeking to connect with the Spirit of God in every person and always inviting yet another person into their homes and their lives. Whether it was a young German man in need of a new start after World War II, the beloveds and friends of their own daughters, their colleagues and students, or a middle-aged woman new to both pastoring and New England, the invitation was always pretty much the same. Why don't you come for dinner? Here, have a seat, drink some wine, eat some delicious food, fill up your heart on hours of meaningful conversation. Come again, rinse and repeat, over and over and over again. And sometimes, if you were too busy to come for dinner, Anita would go to Atkins, pick up a couple of sandwiches and drinks, and bring them to your office for a workday lunch break. And so it was that stories were shared, sometimes more than once or twice. Hearts were opened, bonds were formed, and relationships were deepened. I would love to know how many different people dined or partied with Anita and Thayer throughout their lives, but even also just at their home on Station Road. I know the list would be really long, and it would likely include some names that none of us would have expected to find there. And even if you never received a dinner invitation from Anita and Thayer, I hope you recognize it and their lives as an echo of God's invitation to us all. Come, rest. Let me bring you something good to eat. Let me love you. To be among the number invited to dine at Anita and Thayer's table, to have felt yourself held in their long and heartfelt gazes, was to know yourself loved. Their love was transformative in the way that all true love is. As special as it made you feel, you knew deep in your heart that it had much more to do with who they were than who you were. It was not that you loved them any more than you loved someone else, but that they had loved you. The relationship was deep and close simply because they opened up and invited you in again and again and again, the same way that God opens up and invites us all in again and again and again. While they may not be making them exactly like Thayer and Anita anymore, we all, each and every one of us, has the opportunity to become more truly ourselves, as they did, to choose to continue to walk through this sometimes cruel world with an open heart, and to be ever on the lookout for others to share the journey with us. If each one of us could be even half as open and inviting as Anita and Thayer were, if each one of us could open our hearts half as wide and deep to love and healing and relationship as they did, the world would be a much better place. We lost the best of Anita over the last year or two of her life, and still she left this world as her best self, at deep peace, surrounded by the love of her family. As for Thayer, well, he remained present and engaged almost until the very end, his clear blue eyes taking in and loving each beloved person who came to his bedside. He struggled to breathe and talk during his final hours, but when I told him to keep drinking in the love and the beauty, he mustered a strong "I shall" in response. And so he did. Not long before that, on what would become Thayer's last Christmas, he had wanted everyone to know that God is love. He said it again and again, sometimes quite loudly, as if those were his last words, as if that was his final sermon and his parting instructions. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. And beloveds, since God loves us so much, we also ought to love one another. God is love, so let us love one another. That is Thayer's message for us all, and I dare say Anita's too, to all of us, and especially to their family. You who were loved the longest and deepest, and yes, somewhat imperfectly, by their wide and deep and knowing hearts, know that God is love and that the very best of their love for you came straight from the heart of God. Know, too, that while death ends an earthly life, while death and disease may end two precious lives before we are ready to lose them, death does not and death cannot end relationships. Your connections to Thayer and Anita will be a part of you as long as you live. They, Anita and Thayer, will be a part of you as long as you love. To Becca, Allison, and Rachel, who cared for your parents so well in their last years, well done. They loved you so much and knew themselves every day to be blessed by your love and care. And still, as the writer Margaret Renkel says, the end of caregiving isn't freedom. The end of caregiving is grief. Deep grief reflects great love. So may you grieve your parents as you loved them. Anita and Thayer have been welcomed into the very heart of God, the heart of love, and they now live in the embrace of the same God who was with them for every step of their lives. They were at peace when they left this life, and they are at peace now. Knowing that, may all we who loved them also be at peace. Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you for Anita and Thayer and for your steadfast love and faithfulness to them. We know that just as you were with them at every step of their lives, now they are with you, even as they live on through us. Thank you for understanding how much we miss them. Draw close to us now and embrace us with the comfort and strength of your steadfast love. Renew our hope and fill us with your peace. And so, Holy One, we give Thayer and Anita back to you, you who first gave them to us. As you did not lose them in the giving, we have not lost them in the return. Love is eternal. Love is immortal. Death is a horizon, and the horizon nothing more than the limit of our sight. In the name of the resurrection and the life, we pray. Amen.
This was my
my mother and father's favorite song. They talked about an early dance, Holyoke Amherst dance, where this was playing. I guess the movie came out around then. Take off your mask.
We live together.
This is an arrangement made by Sarah Van Horn. Sorry. I was talking. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you care to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? That was hard.
Beloveds, thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring Thayer and Anita and their family with your presence here. Thank you for loving all of them. May the God who is love comfort you and give you strength. May God, who is love, bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God look upon you with kindness and give you peace. Go now in God's peace with gratitude for Thayer and Anita and for their roles and your life and the many ways they have blessed you and made you who you are. Amen.